We are in Jonah chapter 1. Last time we got through verse 3, and so we're going to start tonight on verse 4. But I have a greeting for you. This is more for the morning group, but Larry Lipke, who often is sitting in the back and cracking jokes in our morning class, has been at the hospital in St. Peter for quite a long time. Back and forth hospital to they have a nursing facility called the Benedictine Center. And he had a knee replacement and it got infected. So he's been in a very, very tight spot for a while. I think he came close to losing the leg, actually. The infection got so bad. But they inserted something I've never heard of before. It was an infection pump, like a suction pump. They inserted a tube into his, sorry if you haven't had supper yet, but they inserted a tube into the new knee fragment, or prosthetic or whatever it is. And then this pump drew any infected fluid or any fluid at all out of it but they've removed all of that. It's a disposable thing. They removed all of it, and he's feeling a lot better. And I went to see him yesterday. He was, for the first time, I don't know, ever, he was beating his wife at canasta. So they're playing cards, and he was in a really good mood, but he wanted me to greet everybody. So Larry says hi to everybody. So God bless you. Yeah. I don't know how long he'll be there at St. Peter. Little while recovering. They probably have to monitor things for a while yet, but I would expect him to be coming home. I was honestly so happy to see him like healthy and happy that I forgot to ask him if he's coming home soon. Next, well, I'll be back in about 2 weeks. I'll go see him again, and I'll ask him then. So. Jonah 1 verse 4 and following. So if you're sort of catching up on the book of Jonah. The prophet was commanded by God to go and preach against the city of Nineveh. Instead, he ran the other way. He goes toward, we talked about this quite a bit last time, but toward, evidently, western Spain. Tarshish is the modern city of Cadiz, which is on the Atlantic coast, not the Mediterranean coast of Spain, so it's way, way far away. And while he was on the way, there is this storm. And we're going to see the language for this storm change as the chapter goes. It's going to change and sort of grow. So then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. So that's a pretty serious storm. The ships in Jonah's time, 9th century BC, 8th century BC, would be put together with probably drilled holes and pegs. They did not have screws and nails, things like that, so drilled holes and pegs, and then caulk and so forth. A little bit earlier, Sumerian culture sort of, got to throw ourselves back into the book of Genesis, maybe before Abraham's time. They actually put ships together by sewing them. If you can imagine a piece of wood with holes drilled in it, lashed or sewn to the next piece of wood over, and then that would be caulked. That's how they held them together. Kind of an iffy way of going about things, in my opinion, but so you have these boats built by planks this way, and as the storm is going, the seams begin to open up, and water begins to get in. Most ships have a bilge. Do you know what that is? The bilge is, say it again?
A space full of water.
Yeah, at the bottom. It's where all the water and the junk goes. All the worst smells in the ship come out of the bilge. Yeah, and that needs to get pumped out regularly. And they in Jonah's time, they would have had pumps, but often like a bellows operated kind of a thing, or a crank. And but the bilge was, there's even more water getting up. What's the most dangerous cargo to be shipping? We talked about this last time. If a ship... Rice.
I was morning.
Oh, you were in the morning group. Oh, sure. Well, that's a brilliant answer, Jeanette. Why is rice a problem? It expands. It'll blow the ship apart from the inside out. Because it's not just the weight, but it actually, water is a non-compressible force. Am I using the word correctly, Professor? And it's gonna just it'll tear the planks off, it'll tear the strakes off and everything, and the ship will go down. So the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God. Their theology is going to change completely in about 6 verses here. But right now, each one is crying out to his own God. So each sailor, you almost maybe have as many religions here as you have sailors. But they're all Phoenicians, but the Phoenicians had a version of Baal, and the Phoenicians had a version of Astarte or Asherah, or goddesses of the stars and things like that. They had all kinds of gods. But most of the gods the Phoenicians worshipped were local deities. So they would have a god of, say, what are the 4 big Phoenicians? Tyre and Sidon. Those are big Phoenician cities. And then in North Africa, Carthage. And then across the sea from Carthage up in Spain, New Carthage. We call it Cartagena today. But that's New Carthage. It's just this Phoenician city. And another place, Cyprus, Crete, they had other places where they were kind of mixing with the Greeks and maybe got Greek deities involved. But they're all praying to their different gods. And they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. So you have junk in the water now. You have flotsam and jetsam. What's the difference between flotsam and jetsam? Do you know? Jetsam is what you've thrown out on purpose. Flotsam is kind of what is left behind when it gets blown off the ship or when the ship sinks, but you've got both in the water. I ask because there's a famous chapter in The Lord of the Rings called Flotsam and Jetsam. But you guys don't know that, do you? That's because this generation has watched Lord of the Rings but not read it. I think that's the problem. So, this generation. Yeah. To throw the cargo into the sea is a big deal. Why?
You're going to have supplies.
Well, not only no supplies, but you're not going to get paid for the voyage. That's your money, is your cargo. You're taking it in order to deliver it and get paid. And they just lost the cargo. So the captain of the ship, to be able to say jettison the cargo, it's got to be life and death. Because he might lose the ship anyway. If he can't pay for the cargo he's been hauling, he may have to sell the ship to pay the contractor back in Joppa. So it's got to be a matter of life and death to jettison the cargo like this. But not only the cargo, but eventually, as they do in the book of Acts, they might begin to jettison other parts of the ship besides the cargo, like all of the removable things. The crossbars of the masts themselves might get unshipped and tossed. They might, the tackle, which is all the ropes and all of the block and tackle, the handy-billy operations and all of that, it might all go over. If it were a ship of war, they might pitch the cannons or the balustrades or whatever they had, if they had anything at all like that. But all of that stuff, the beds, the books, the only thing they might have left is a couple of the animals. Why would you have animals aboard a ship? Food, it's probably not a milk cow, but you might have hogs and chickens and stuff to be able to butcher while you're underway. It's easier than having it in brine barrels if you just have it in the manger, just alive. So they throw everything. But Jonah, Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. Sorry, I made three of you yawn just then. I apologize. I'm sorry. They are contagious. Why would Jonah be sleeping? Well, we have the example of Jesus also in a boat in a storm sleeping, and he was tired. But there's something else about Jonah. When people are running away from God, they often run away from everything, including social situations. They run away essentially from consciousness. That their sinful state gets them to sort of withdraw from everything. It's similar, but not identical, to depression, where a person suffering from depression may just go into a state where they just want to sleep all the time. Now, that's a separate thing. That's an illness, whereas the withdrawing from God is a sin. So that separates those things. But they can end up with a very similar feature, where you're just sleeping to avoid even thinking about God. And that seems to be what Jonah is doing. So deep sleep. The captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep?" You might think, I got a passenger with arms and legs, help us to throw the cargo overboard. That's not what he says. Get up and call on your God. What a role for the captain to do. How come you're not praying? Thank you, Captain. How come you're not steering the ship? But that's what he does. He call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us, and we will not perish. So the captain has done almost everything he could. What things do you do in a storm? You turn the nose of the ship into the waves. He's fighting the waves. He's taken down the sails so that they're not going to flip over. They jettison the cargo. And now pray. When the captain of the ship comes to you and says, "You'd better pray," I think you'd better pray. Yeah. Say that again? Was Jonah disguised when he went on board the ship? We're going to find out in chapter 10 that Jonah had told everybody what he was doing. I mean, not chapter 10, verse 10. Just a couple of verses. Jonah had already told them, "Hi, I'm running away from the Lord. I'm supposed to be doing a prophet thing up in Nineveh, but I'm going to Spain with you guys." So yeah, he wasn't in disguise at all. They knew who he was, and certainly at least what he was doing. Even if he hadn't told them, "I'm a prophet," they knew he was running away from the Lord. Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity, this very, very bad thing." What are lots? Well, what do we do today if you can't decide? My sons and I are having a disagreement over what to have for supper. Is it hot dogs or is it pizza? And what do we do? Who has straws? We usually flip a coin. And flip a coin fits the text a little bit better. It's like casting lots. You flip a coin. When I was a kid, a lot of quarters we had in my town were painted red. Did you ever come across those?
Yeah.
Once upon a, you know what they are?
No.
Red quarters came from like a restaurant or a bar or some place that had a jukebox. The owner would paint his own quarters red and put them in so that people would hear music when they came in, and then they would pump money into the jukebox. And then when it came time for the guy, the jukebox company guy, to come and collect the money, he would take out the red ones because they belonged to the owner, and then he would get everything else. But that's what that was all about once upon a time. It's a little bit like casting lots, though. We would do it with coins when I was a kid. You'd shake your hand up, your fist, and you'd have a regular quarter and a red one, or whatever, and throw, and which one comes out. So But their lots, they were usually cubes. They were similar to ivory, but usually a lot cheaper. And they were often painted. 3 sides would be dark and 3 sides would be light, which reminds me, if they're cubes, they remind me of throwing what? Dice, yeah. They didn't have dice, though. Their cubes were usually, sorry about this, knuckle bones. Not human knuckle bones, but knuckle bones. And like of a bear or something. And they would you sand them a little bit, and they would act like dice. And the thing about them is that then they're it's not like wood, and they don't have any intrinsic value, but you use them as, you can use them for a game or something like that. But lots could also be something else, more like a coin, or like straws, like Brad said, like draw straws, right? Or something along those lines. They might have been, it seems like lots were a little bit different culture to culture, but they talked about casting lots. The Lord in the Bible talks about casting lots in the lap. So something you could just do in your lap. In China, a variation of this came about where sticks that are long but 4-sided would have 2 sides that would be dark and 2 sides that would be light. We usually call those sticks chopsticks, okay? But you'd have 6 of them. You'd kind of do this and throw them, and then you would see what the pattern is, and then you go to this book by Confucius called the I Ching, and you look up what that pattern just told you is your lucky saying for the day. Have you heard of the I Ching? Or if you don't know Chinese pronunciation, the I Ching. You ever heard of this? Not?
The Tao Te Ching.
The what?
Tao Te Ching.
Well, a Tao is a teaching of, so yeah, something like that. Anyway, the I Ching was done with 6 chopsticks this way. But very similar to casting lots. Well, Jonah, the good storyteller, you can tell that he's practiced the story like as an oral storyteller, because he says they cast lots and the lot fell on Jonah. Yeah. Well, you need it. It's necessary to hear the word spoken, because that gives the satisfying result. But that's how a good storyteller will tell a story. Even if you know the story, you have to hear the story told. So the lot fell on Jonah, and now they pepper him with questions. And I think that in verse 8 here, we only have a sampling of the questions, because they were coming from every side here. They asked him, tell us, who's responsible for making all this trouble for us? What do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? I mean, they could have added, what's your shoe size? They're asking all these questions, and it's just this, and they now that they know, because they threw lots, they know that Jonah's the problem, right? Now they want to know why. Why is this happening? I mean, from the sailor's perspective, if God was mad at Jonah, couldn't he have done something to Jonah without destroying the whole ship?
Certainly.
I mean, anything, right? He got his foot caught in the anchor chain. Oh, bye-bye. And a block and tackle could have fallen from the mainmast and hit him on the head. That he could have been down below in the hold, and the prize boar, Wilbur, could have gotten out of the manger and charged and knocked him down and killed him, or whatever. Are boars named Wilbur anymore? Anyway, that's some pig. And whatever might have happened. But instead, God threw a storm that threatened. Well, what did the storm? Why? So let me just ask the question more thoroughly. Why not just kill him? Why make the storm hit the ship? Two main reasons. But you got one more?
The ship would not be on the way to a destination in a storm like that. So Jonah's fleeing was done.
So just to stop the running away. That's one. Another one?
God wanted to teach the people
teaching the people who God was. There's an opportunity here for Jonah to confess what's really going on. And therefore, it's an opportunity, even as unlikely as it seems. Not only is it a law storm, but it's a gospel storm for those sailors, because they're going to find out who the true God is. So isn't that odd that this terrible calamity could be both a law storm and a gospel storm? I was recording my devotion, I think, was it Monday night or was it Sunday night? And we had that big storm. Was it Sunday night? And I'm trying to record. I'm right next to my bedroom window trying to record this thing, and there's flashes. Pretty exciting. So I just cranked my window open and let the storm be recorded onto the devotion, there's the rain. And I wondered, will the Lord send any thunderbolts into the devotion, or not this time, But that did happen once. Do you mind if I just? We do an outdoor service every summer, but now we do it at the school. It's the what does Pastor Scharf call it? The summer send-off on coming September 6th. I was watching the screen this weekend, but I'm preaching here, when he's preaching there. That'll be my first St. Paul sermon since the 4th of July weekend. I'll let you do the math there. We had this big series this summer. We'll do a pulpit exchange. Everybody will be happy. And I think that got me out of the pulpit for 2.5 months. But anyway, never mind. Okay. I got to do funerals. So anyway, in the old days, we did this earlier in the summer down at German Park. It got buggy and it got rainy some years, and then COVID kind of did, but now we just do it up here as a group. But we used to do that. Well, early in my time at St. Paul's, this is 2000. I think it was the summer of 2001 actually. So I was up to do that service, and I remember I was preaching on Psalm 150, which has all these musical instruments in it, and I had them all. I had 2 tables in front of me down in the park, and I played every musical instrument in the psalm and talked about how it's used in the Bible and stuff. And that was the gist of the sermon. But then there's law and gospel and everything. And every time I said, "And God hates that sin," boom, there was an actual rumble of thunder. And one of the professors from the college, he was my teacher in my college days, and he was a member at St. John's. He came up to me after this. "How did you do that? How did you make it thunder every time on cue? How did you do that?" And of course, I just said, "Clean living," So Jonah's peppered with all these questions, and I think it's more questions than we have here. But they want to know all these things. And what does he answer? "I am a Hebrew." He identifies himself a little bit differently. "And I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land." So you have some interesting details. First of all, the word Hebrew. What does Hebrew mean?
Children of Eber or something like that.
It seems to be, say it again, Marcia.
Children of Eber?
It seems to mean children of Eber. Notice that the Israelites, I'll just use that word, are never called the Abrahamites, are they? And wouldn't you think they would have been called the Abrahamites? We're the children of Abraham, right? "Father Abraham had many sons. I am one of them, and so are 2. Didn't you ever go to camp? Anyway, they're never called the Isaacites or the Isaacim or whatever they would be. Why not? Well, Abraham lived a pretty long life. I didn't look it up, but it's, 175 years? A pretty long life. But for the patriarchs, the post-flood patriarchs, 175 is kind of like middle of the road. Certainly not 700 years, not 900 years, right? 175. And then Isaac, has a life in the it's 140 or 137, whatever it is. When Jacob is in Egypt and he meets Pharaoh, whichever Pharaoh that was, Sesostris, we don't really teach the Pharaoh's names, but yeah, Jacob meets Pharaoh, and Pharaoh asks him, how old are you, father? And he says, I'm only like 140. And he says, and for my people, that's just, I remember, did he say it's a disappointing age? Like I'm feeling my age, and I'm hardly anywhere near what my dad was, that kind of a thing. And so, but there's this guy who was alive, who was not born all that long after the flood. What is he? Is he the grandson or great-grandson of Noah, or of Shem anyway, named Eber. And he is still alive all through Abraham's lifetime. So they are the Ivri, the Hebrew, we would say the Hebrews, the children of Eber, because great-grandpa Eber is still living. And Abraham is not the father of the family. He's like the great-grandson of the family. And that's still going on in Isaac's lifetime. Eber is still in a tent out back. We're still taking Grandpa Eber his applesauce every morning. He's still alive and with us, or whatever they fed him. I would like applesauce. Wouldn't you like it? Yeah. I haven't had supper yet. Now I'm thinking I'd like applesauce. But then Eber, in his 400s, Eber dies, and Jacob is the one who's the patriarch. Now, not only does Jacob, in the line of the faithful, but he's got this family too. So what do the sons of Jacob do? They call themselves the Bnei Yisrael, translate that for me, children of Israel, right? And then they'll talk about their various tribes, their clans. I'm one of the children of Israel. I'm from the tribe of Judah. I'm from the tribe of Gad, and so forth. So they maintain that after Jacob's time. But so Hebrew would be a name that would be recognized, I think, by a foreigner. And these guys are Phoenician sailors, so I'm a Hebrew. The chance you may have heard of Eber, he was that guy who lived a really, really long time. So they might have heard of Hebrew. And then he says, I worship the Lord. He uses the Lord's name, which means the God of mercy and grace, the God who makes promises and always keeps them. He is the God of free love, faithful love, and so forth. And then he calls him the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. So heaven, where is the storm coming from? Out of the sky, out of heaven. The sea is against us. Who made the sea? Same God. The land is far away. We can't get there. And who's the God of the land? Same God. You guys have local deities, your Baals and your Asherahs and whatever else is. Mine is the God who's over all of those things. And the effect that this has on the sailors, terror. This terrified them. And they ask, what have you done? They knew he was running away from the Lord because, and here it is. He had already told them so. So this, the grammar of that sentence is that's called a perfect tense. So it's in the past, but not the recent past. This is already a done deal. He had told them so earlier. Naoko, did you have something to add there?
I do. So the sailors knew that there is the Lord.
Yeah.
They were worshiping the freedom God.
They knew
that there's a God.
They've obviously heard of this one. Yeah. Now we get to the sea and the storm. The cargo's already overboard, right? Now it gets worse. And it's going to get worser still. So the sea was getting rougher and rougher. I really held back. I even had a video frame. The weather started getting rough. The tiny ship was tossed and lifted. Well, anyway. So the sea now getting rougher and rougher. So they asked him, what should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us? They've nailed it down by casting lots and by talking to the guy. He's the one who's at fault, and it's because he's running away from his God, the God who's bigger than all of our gods. And so they say, what should we do to you? I mean, what are the choices? Should you say shame? What should we do to you? What could they do to him? I think there are various versions of kill him. They may no longer have had a mast to hang him with, right, from the highest yardarm. They did sometimes in ancient times do something where they would take a rope and pass it under the ship and then pass it over the top of the ship, bow to stern, front to back, and tie the guy onto the rope and then make him pass under the ship along the keel and drag him forward until he finally came up again. It's called keel hauling. And of course the bottom of a ship is full of barnacles and lots of other owie scrapey things. Pardon my technical language. But yeah, owie scrapey things and defects in the hull and whatever else down there. And by the time the guy got up, not only would he be a bloody wreck, but he'd probably have drowned, right? They could keel haul him. They could throw him overboard. They could, maybe it would lighten the ship if we got rid of this giant anchor, oh captain. Let's tie him to that. And off he goes and whatever. So what should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us? And Jonah doesn't say, hold on a minute, boys. Right? What does he say? Pick me up and throw me in. Why didn't Jonah just jump overboard? Honestly, could you? There's a storm, you're in trouble. Could you just jump over? I'm not talking about into the pool. I'm talking about in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea with no land around and in the middle of a hurricane or whatever. Could you just jump over? So Jonah says, I can't do it. There's that other line in The Lord of the Rings. You're going to have to toss me. You can't bring yourself to do it. Someone else is going to have to do it for you. So, Mark. If he jumped himself, he would be. Now we cover this in the fifth commandment and the fourth commandment in catechism class. There are times when sending yourself into a situation where you know it's going to be lethal is not suicide. If you're saving the lives of others. And you have a couple of examples there. You have the example of the soldier who throws himself onto a grenade. Or those poor guys at Chernobyl who went into the building after the nuclear accident and they went in to throw switches off, and some of them were firefighters who went in. You have the example in 9/11. So many policemen and firemen who went up into the building, and there are stories of guys who during those hours went all the way up, came all the way down with people, and then went back in for more, and never came out again, and things like that, and to save lives. People running into a burning building, again, to save lives, and other examples like that. In this case, if Jonah had thrown himself in order to spare the lives of the sailors, it might have qualified like that, but I still don't think I could have done it. Just throw yourself into the water to calm the storm. I don't know. But he says, pick me up, throw me in, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. So Jonah admits, I knew it was like this. The Lord could have killed me lots of ways, but instead there's this storm, and why is it? To, what do we say? Stop the running away, to be able to confess both his sin and his faith. To simply kill him, the Lord wouldn't have given him an opportunity to confess. and be forgiven. But he gave them the chance to confess. It's also, I've said it's also a gospel storm as far as the sailors go. There's all kinds of stuff going on here. But instead, the men did their best to, does our translation say? Row back to land. The Hebrew word, yes?
I have a silly question. What do you mean when you say gospel storm and lost storm?
That was coming out of the discussion earlier. It's a law storm because it's stopping Jonah from sinning. It's a gospel storm because this will cause the opportunity for Jonah to tell the sailors who the true God really is, and to confess his faith. It's my fault for making a public yawn. No, I'm kidding. You weren't one of the ones who yawned. So instead, the men did their best to row. And the Hebrew word here is not really the usual word for row or paddle. It's dig. They dug. So, you ever been in a canoe and tried to go really fast? That's where your angle gets different on the paddle, right? And you maybe go deeper, thinking if I scrape through more water, I'll go, faster. Usually you end up just turning the canoe in a circle, but it happens. But in a ship this size, by the way, they wouldn't have had what we call oars. Usually an oar or a scull is where you have like one guy or maybe one guy per oar. This is where you have two guys per oar, and they're usually called sweeps. They're massive. Like in Ben-Hur, when you got the slaves down and they're going ramming speed and everything like that, and you got 2-3 guys per, those are sweeps. They're enormous. And that's what they were probably, and they're doing their best to dig back through the water to get back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. What? So first the storm is so bad that they have to jettison everything. Then it gets rougher and rougher. Remember that verse? And now wilder than before. What do we call a storm like this? If it's in, say, the Atlantic? A hurricane. Yeah. Shakespeare in The Tempest. In King Lear. Hurricanos, he says. That is what Lear yells. Blow, you crack your cheeks and everything. A hurricane. Besides Jonah, where are other examples of big storms like this in the Bible? Sea of Galilee. Bad storm? Is it like this, though? I don't know. But a bad storm. I'll allow it. I'll allow it. Yeah. Is there one that's worse than that? Oh, the flood. I think that the flood comes out of the realm of bad storms, the way that Moses comes out of the realm of prophets. Yeah, counts, but he's in a class all by himself. So, yes, the storm that caused the flood. I hadn't even thought of that, Mark. Yeah. I was thinking of in the book of Acts, when Paul, aboard the Castor and Pollux, that one ship, when the storm actually destroys their ship, and Paul sees this vision that tells him, the Lord tells him, none of you will die. And the guys who can swim, they jump off, and the guys who can't, they get them attached all to like boards and planks and barrels and whatever else, and the pigs and things. Go ahead, Mark.
This might be in the slide, but the storms, don't they rate gales by 1 through 10, with 10 being the worst possible physical force?
Will you start that question again?
Aren't gales, according to force, like force 1 is a mild gale, but force 10 was the most intense?
Oh yeah, that has to do with the windsock out at the airport. Depending on where the sock is, that tells you what gale force the wind is right now. Yeah, that's right. I was also thinking of the storm in the book of Job, the storm that the Lord speaks out of to Job. But that's coming across the desert. That's like a thunderstorm, like a bad one. Another one.
When Elijah was in the cave
Elijah in the cave. Way to go. Yeah. Oh, you guys have doubled what they got this morning. The room was too full. It was kind of hot, and yeah, people were, yeah. Yeah, excellent, excellent. And there might be others. So good. The sea now grows wilder than before. And of course, the thing about this too is what's happening right now with what she called Aaron, the hurricane that's in the Atlantic off the Florida coast right now. Or now it's up by the Georgia coast by now, but it's, I won't say it's turning. It's going to actually come back west because of the pressure systems. But what happens with hurricanes is when they go from the Atlantic deep water, then they get to the shallow water of the Caribbean, and it's almost always a lot warmer. They pick up force. Shallower water and warmer water, and they get worse. If they turn and go back into the Atlantic, it's colder water and deeper water, and they often lose some of their force. This one, Aaron actually did something storms occasionally do. It lost its eye, and then it reacquires the eye, and that always drops it down a peg or two with the force, the hurricane force. But so that issue we have in America, where we've got Atlantic storms that get into the Mediterranean, into the Caribbean. You've got shallow versus deep and cold versus warm. The Caribbean can be very warm water, depending on the time of year. You have the same thing happening in the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean, very, very roughly, is like sideways hourglass shaped. It pinches between Spain and Carthage. Okay, about there, about halfway through. And the end over by Israel is the deep end. And the end that's over by the Atlantic, that goes through the Strait of Gibraltar, is the shallow end, which is kind of counterintuitive, but that's what it is. It's a little bit like the shallow end and the deep end at the pool over at the Vogel. And so storms moving through can pick up force right there, which is where Paul's ship got hit, right at Malta, which is right in that area of the pinch of the Mediterranean Sea. And so I kind of wonder, how far did this ship get? Is that about the same place where this ship, got hit, or was it not, or was it nowhere near yet? I don't know. I don't know the answer. Nor do I know if it was taking the northern route or the southern route, because ships in those days would not be navigating through the middle of the ocean. You would navigate by landmarks on the shoreline. Otherwise you have no idea how far you've come. Even if they were casting a log to see how many knots, that's actually pretty advanced and not an easy task. But they would be going by like, I recognize that rock and that mountain and things like that. So, wilder than before. Then they cried to the Lord. I told you their denomination was going to switch here. And oh Lord, please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Can you imagine being Jonah standing there on deck listening to this prayer? Please don't kill us for killing this man. Oh, thanks, guys. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, O Lord, have done as you pleased. Just a quick comment here. Can you count the number of times the word Lord occurs in this verse? 3? The doctrine of the Trinity is everywhere in Scripture. Even Genesis 1, verses 1, 2, and 3. You have Father, Holy Spirit, and Son. And many other places in the Old Testament, especially the second half of Isaiah, in the Psalms, and places in Jeremiah, in Daniel, in some of the minor prophets. But here you have this little echo of it. God has this mysterious and divine quality of threeness. And three to ancient people and in the Bible is often a symbolic number reserved for God, for divine things. Where does the threeness of God encounter the four square numeral of man? Well, that can be 7, which is like a numeral indicating holiness. But if you multiply them, it's 12, the number of the church. No,
It's a football team. 12 players on the field.
that's 11 on a football team.
Oh, 12 men.
I just blew the whistle on you, man. And no, 3 times 4 is 12, then the number of the church, number of apostles, the number of the sons of Jacob, the number of the tribes, and so forth, and on. But here you get this little echo. It was St. Augustine who said, in the Old Testament there is Christ concealed. In the New Testament there is Christ revealed. And it's good for us who see Christ revealed to also notice things that remind us of Christ in the Old Testament. The Old Testament often opens up in marvelous ways when we can, not to allegorize, but we can see things that remind us of Christ in the Old Testament. Okay. Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard. And the raging sea grew calm. Grew here, became, is not necessarily, instantaneous. There were times when Jesus calmed the storm, like on the Sea of Galilee, and it was instantly calm, like a mirror. This was more of a grew calm, like it became, we're talking about the Mediterranean Sea here, and so there might have been a little bit of rocking and sloshing and still some nauseous guys, but the storm was over. And there's Jonah. But the storm is over. The raging sea grew calm, and now, as the ship continues on its way with the current at least, and Jonah bobs there, getting further and further behind, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. First of all, on a ship where they've already thrown off all of the cargo, what did they sacrifice? If they still had Wilbur in the hold, right? Bring him up here and slit his throat and we'll sacrifice the pig or whatever it was. They might have had, there's always a living creature on a boat, right? A rat, a mouse, a cat, something. If it's a boat that I've been in for some reason, a bat, whatever it is. But there's usually something. But probably there may have been something bigger, like one of their actual. I wouldn't have been surprised if it would have been like a goat or a lamb, or something. And they made a sacrifice. They made vows to him. What kind of vow might they make? I see wheels turning in Naoko's eyes. No idea? Oh, that's okay. I shouldn't have called on you.
Touch land again and I'll worship you.
It could be something like that. Like we'll only worship you, O Lord, God of the heavens, who made the sea and who made the land. Now, did they hold to those vows? I don't know. You ever heard of somebody coming to faith and then dropping away later? Remember the parable of the sower? Right? Their faith shoots up rapidly, but then when the sun comes out, it doesn't have very deep roots, and so it scorches. I was just talking about this afternoon with Pastor Ailhoff, and we were comparing notes about some friends. And one guy I went to school with who left the ministry is now coming back into the ministry. It's exciting to hear. I'm really happy about that. We were good friends, I'm glad. But we also then were remembering, in my time, do you know that I'm a second career pastor? I was something else for 10 years. While I should have been in the class with like Professor Kelpine and Professor Stelius and those guys, I should have been their classmate. Okay? But I was 10 years later. Because I went into the workforce, I became, for a while, I was a house painter, and I was a McDonald's manager. I was a goat herd for a while and did, anyway, all these things I did. But then I went back to school and studied for the ministry. And while I was doing that, we had other men. It was called the Second Career Program. You know, you could go to school later in life. We had, on average, sometimes less, but usually more, on average, 10 to 12 guys in that program every year in the program. And oftentimes they were new converts to Lutheranism. They had been Baptist or Assembly of God or Methodist or something, and now they were, and they had heard the gospel sometimes, you know, and they were fired up about this gospel of the forgiveness of sins. But they would get to Northwestern College, and I got to learn what? And yeah.
Is that Washington?
Northwestern College was in Watertown, Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
It is now our prep school. When it was called Northwestern, it was the northwestern frontier of the United States. No, that's how long ago it was. That's why there's also a Northwestern, a little bit older, that's in Chicago. I mean, there was a reason why they were called Northwestern. There's a whole string of them. But our Northwestern was in Watertown, Wisconsin. And so in my 4 years at Northwestern College, I knew a little bit more than 40 guys who were in the Second Career Program with me. Ahead of me, 3 of them graduated and entered into the ministry, and me. So of those 40 who were ahead of me, and there were more that came by, a terrible attrition rate. A lot of guys who came in and just did not make it. And sometimes because they themselves bit off more than they could possibly chew. I had friends who I'd say, how many classes did you take? I'm only taking 5 classes. What are they? Oh, I'm taking the religion class with you, and then I'm taking Latin, German, Greek, and Hebrew. You've got to be kidding. I knew one of those guys who ran out of a Greek test, screaming, because he was trying to read it backwards like Hebrew. And he could not make it, he could not understand it. And he just got up and ran away. He made it, by the way. He's the one who taught me canasta. Okay. But terrible attrition rate of students. But a few of us made it. But sacrificing to the Lord, making vows to Him, I'll worship this. So did they stay with it? I don't know. Like some of my classmates, maybe some of them, maybe one of them did. Maybe some of them did not. I don't know. We'll find out when we get to heaven. There's at least one writing prophet in the Bible, who does not have a Hebrew name, who came a little bit later. Could he be the descendant of one of these guys? You know? He has a weird name. It's not Hebrew at all. It means Gordy. We pronounce it Habakkuk. Not Hebrew. Seems to be Akkadian for gourd. So that's why I said Gordy, because, you know, why not? So, like Gordy Cooper. All right. Oh, we got pictures to look at. Let's keep going here. All right. I don't think I'm going to finish verse 17, but let's get started, because I got pictures. All right. But the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was inside the fish 3 days and 3 nights. So, first of all, the word provided, it comes from the Hebrew word which means to count, bana. It means to count. Not like the manna that fell in the book of Exodus, but like in the book of Daniel. You remember what the handwriting on the wall said in Aramaic? Ooh, Marcia's on fire. Yeah. Mene tekel upharsin. Which mene is Aramaic for mana, means counted again. Tekel is Persian for shekel. It means you're a shekel short here. You've been counted, you're found wanting. And now upharsin in Hebrew means, here come the Persians. Yeah, that's what that handwriting on the wall meant. So this word provided is a form of the verb for to count. And in the book of Daniel, in Daniel 1 verse 5, which is my email devotion verse for tonight, I was reading it this last night and this morning, and I was like, this fits Jonah today, because it's the same word when the king counts out and doles out the food from the royal table to the young men who are studying to be his courtiers. And it's that apportioning, appointing of food. I know that there are some people who want this verb here to say that God created this fish. But this word never means created. It more often means to count, or in this stem we have here, and that Daniel has, it's called the Piel stem. It means to distribute or to assign something. There's even a line in a book by Xenophon, this Greek writer who was living at the time of Cyrus the Great, which is in the book of Daniel. That's one of the kings. And he tells the story of young Cyrus. And young Cyrus comes into the king's court, and the king is his grandfather at the time. This is young Cyrus. And his king says, Cyrus, you apportion the food today. It's the same word. You apportion the food. And Cyrus has the banquet table, and all these servants are in there, and he goes, well, you can have this because you taught me to ride a horse. Thank you. And you can have this because you gave me this really cool javelin. I still have it. Thank you very much. And you can have this part because you gave me that really good bow and arrow. Thank you. And he goes around the room, and you treated my mother well. I'm serious. This is all in this book, in the Cyropedia, this book by Xenophon about young Cyrus. And so he's apportioning. There's also a punchline here, because which I can't get into in the devotion, so I'll just give it to you, if you don't mind. You get extra credit for having been here tonight. So as he's doing this apportioning, his grandfather notices, hey, you forgot my cupbearer. Why didn't you give him any food? And Cyrus says, because he just poisoned you. He says, how do you know? And Cyrus says, well, look at what he did. Because this guy, this cupbearer would come in, and he always made a big deal out of how elegant he was. And he talks about how beautiful I look in my robes, and he's this guy. And he always holds the cup carefully between his thumb and forefinger. The royal cup, heavy royal cup, like I'm that strong. And it never ripples. And he says, look how I mixed the wine. Some wine, some spices, a little bit of water. And it never a ripple on the surface of the cup. And he does that. And what is the cup holder really supposed to do? What would we call him in a court today? Yeah, he should have tested it, right? And young Cyrus says that the cup never touched his lips. And the king and the king looks, and everybody like, put your wine down, and they find it is poisoned. And Cyrus is the one and the king just laughs, and he promotes Cyrus and his grandson and all this stuff. But the one that applies to us is how he distributes all the food. And here the same word, the Lord provided, distributed, he assigned this animal. Now, just quickly, what kind of fish was it? Well, the Hebrew word for fish is pronounced dag, D-A-G. Say dag. Dag. And then gadol, which means big in Hebrew. So you have a dag gadol, a big fish, right? Well, ancient artists didn't know what kind of a fish it was. So a lot of times they would paint this portrait, and you end up having something that to me looks an awful lot like a trout or a bass or a bullhead or something, right? I have no idea what's going on there. Dogfish, I don't know what that is. Notice Jonah's coming out praying though. Or it looks like he's diving off the diving board, but he's praying. Notice how close to Nineveh this author thought he was. There's no ocean near Nineveh, by the way, unless he's in the Tigris or the river. This guy at the time of Luther does this woodcut. Look at that thing to the right. Kind of a mouth. Well, the question I have is, though, what did they know of big fish?
Clearly not a lot.
Well, they had never seen anything much bigger than a sturgeon, right? Therefore, what do all their big fish kind of look like?
Giant sturgeon.
To me, sturgeon, big sturgeon, yeah. Michelangelo had never even seen a sturgeon. That's what's on the Sistine Chapel. Like a brook trout or whatever that thing is, right? That's just a trout. Kind of a pig nose on it, but yeah, that's... So some other things, I just want to point out a couple of more pieces of artwork as long as we're here. Obviously in the inset, that's Christ being laid into a casket, right? Before he's buried. They thought he would have a casket besides. But look in the lower left corner, I'll zoom in on it. Jonah going into the water, into the fish. A reference to what? Christ says 3 days and 3 nights, right? And I love this one. This is, I don't know if this is Van Dyke or who this is, but it's the resurrection of Jesus. He's got the banner of the salvation. You've got a soldier there and a guy sleeping and a guard and whatever and a slave down at the bottom. But look what Jesus is standing on, like a stone, but it's on a kind of a pedestal. More closely at the pedestal.
Jonah.
It's Jonah and the fish. Yeah. And again, though, they didn't know. From Luther's time, somebody in Italy had found a grounded fish and did a quick sketch and made a big old wood. That looks more like a whale, doesn't it? Like a fin whale or something. So when you see them with barrels there, they're going to cut it up quick before it blows up. They have to cut the thing in pieces and so forth. But we'll come back to this. But the word for fish in Hebrew, could it be whale? Could it be some other kind of fish? I know that sometimes our pastors and teachers have said it couldn't possibly be a whale because a whale isn't a fish. Well, that's not the way Moses talks when he talks about animals. You have swimmers, you have flyers, you have crawlers, you have wild animals, and you have domestic animals. And so all, the crawdads I hunted for, and yes, ate raw as a boy. The squid and the octopus and the crab and all of that, they're all in the same category as a fish, right? A goldfish, a bluegill, a dolphin, a whale, all are swimmers. And it could have been any of those. So which one was it? Not really sure, but something was there. And we'll start next time talking very seriously about the 3 days and 3 nights and how that applies. So we'll just meet there next Tuesday. Fair enough? The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Thanks for letting me do this. Have a very good night tonight. God bless you. You've been listening to Invisible Church, the Bible study podcast from St. Paul's Lutheran Church, New Ulm, Minnesota.